Hello, happy Friday, everyone, and happy Black Widow Day, a movie that only took 10 years to happen and then another year to come out because there's a freaking pandemic. But now, 11 years after her motion picture debut, the Black Widow movie is here. We are going to get into spoilers in a couple minutes. We'll give you another warning before we do that. First, though, to talk about Black Widow here with me is Kim, and making her SJU debut, Bailey. Guys, welcome. Ready to dive into some Black Widow?
Too ready.
Very ready, yes. So, like I said, we're going to get into all the spoilers. Again, the movie's out in theaters. It's on Disney Plus with Premiere Access if you want to pay $30. So it's gonna be full spoilers in a minute. But first, I do want to ask before we do that, just quick, sort of 30 seconds or less, overall reaction to the movie without spoilers. Kim, what are your overall thoughts on Black Widow?
Before I get into that, I just want to say, is it Budapest or Budapest?
That's going to be like an argument for the ages, right?
Overall, yes, I thought it was really successful. I really enjoyed it. For a film that I wasn't that bothered about on paper, that I said, I was happy to wait for and watch on the small screen. I actually ended up seeing it on an IMAX screen, which was well worth it. It really surprised me and pleased me. Those are my basic thoughts. I've got lots of deeper thoughts we'll get into later.
Gotcha. And Bailey, what'd you think?
Yeah, hot take, but I thought it was really fun. Maybe I got sort of marveled out a couple years ago when it felt like there was a new movie every week and I was just paying $20 to see it on IMAX because my TV is too small to properly enjoy the CG or whatever. But I don't know, maybe it was just novel or something, but I had a really good time watching it. I had a fun time. I'm glad I saw it in theaters.
Soon you could be marveled out again, since this is the first of 4 movies opening in the rest of this year on top of all the shows. Yeah, I will echo. I really enjoyed this, and I also wasn't sure going in. I'll talk more soon about the specifics of a couple of quibbles I had, including with some of the stuff they did with the villains and some of the stuff near the end of the film. But overall, I actually thought it was a very good sort of solo movie in the Marvel Universe, one of their stronger ones, and did make itself sort of feel like worthy, even though it was coming timing-wise a very strange time. We'll dig into all of that. So, okay, full spoiler warning. Here you go. We're going to go into all the spoilers for Black Widow. So go watch it if you haven't. Come back and watch this video. If you have watched it, stay with us. 3, 2, 1. We are now in the spoiler zone. All right, Black Widow. Let us talk about, first of all, getting a little more granular here. What worked for you, guys? Kim, what really stood out to you as sort of the strengths of this film?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things actually was, whatever you think of the plot, and I think, with Marvel movies, we're often able to predict what will happen or might happen because they draw from the comic books. So frequently, so, someone somewhere will have guessed what's going to happen in any given Marvel movie. So for me, it's often how it gets from A to B that matters, and this does it really well. I think, what do we want from that kind of a movie? Well, we want to be entertained. I think we want a good balance of good characterization and good acting and action and good dialogue, and I think this delivers in all of those. Maybe the acting at times, thinking of Ray Winston's villain, maybe that's not his fault, but maybe there are some holes there. But on the whole, we've come to expect a sense of humor from Marvel movies, and it brings that, and a bit of self-reflexivity too, and it delivers on that with some callbacks, etc., and sending itself up. So yes, how it gets from A to B is the main thing that I liked about it.
Mm-hmm. What about for you, Bailey? What was sort of the biggest strengths of the film?
Yeah, I would say that with this movie, one thing that I was really impressed by, and this isn't to knock the acting in other Marvel movies or to universally praise the acting in this one, but I do think we have such a strong core cast of actors in it that what happened was you have one character that everyone knows and then a bunch of brand new people, and they inhabited their roles so well and worked with each other so well that it was just really compelling. And it kind of didn't matter that we hadn't met any of them before, 10 minutes ago. You cared about them. You didn't want them to die in a big fiery ship crash. it was compelling.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that. It's like, because this movie made the choice, a concerted choice to introduce an entire new group of characters. Because there's a version of this movie where you try to throw in someone familiar, that we already know along for the ride. But I think they very purposely didn't, to the point that I'm like, I thought we were going to see Jeremy Renner in a flashback and we only heard his voice talking to her. And like, I think they made a very big decision. Like, we want this to focus on Natasha and this family we never knew about. But yeah, they're all great characters and a really fun group of actors. And the other thing I really liked about this movie was, and I know it's all relative. So when I say that it was darker than I expected, and for the MCU, I realized it's not like Seven dark. There's plenty of humor and action, but like even the opening credits, I was like, oh, this is pretty heavy. Like, there's a bunch of little girls being rounded up and, kidnapped, and we are flat out told murdered if they don't kind of make the cut here. So the fact that they sort of didn't shy away from that and her history, and the fact that they were, literally killers, like even, introducing Yelena murdering someone, I thought was, I admired them doing that, because there is a much sort of cleaner, even sunnier version of this movie. So yeah, I thought all that stuff really worked. And then, yeah, just especially the character dynamics and the Natasha, Yelena back and forth, I thought was great. But let's talk about, you've made some references here, and I think I'll agree with some of it. Let's talk about what didn't work, jumping out at you. Kim, I know you talked about one character, perhaps. What's leaping out at you on the didn't work side?
So I know, a lot of people have criticized the villain in this film, and rightly so. I think, he's a two-dimensional villain, but I think there are reasons for that. And I think that they had a really difficult challenge with this movie in creating this villain, because they weren't setting up some villain that was going to reappear further down the line. He had to be someone that could be kind of done and dealt with in this movie, and somebody that would play well against what we were examining about Natasha, which was her own conflicted status. She's got red in her ledger, and I think someone that was kind of two-dimensionally evil actually works quite well. So while I'm criticizing it, I'm also praising it, and it also evokes James Bond. He's very Blofeld, very Hugo Drax was the other one I thought of from Moonraker, which of course is directly referenced in this film.
I mean, it turns out Natasha could quote Moonraker line for line. That was a huge reveal. Actually, a very fun one. Bailey, what stands out as something that didn't work about the film?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Kim about that. The villain was a little two-dimensional. It felt it was odd for me because you see the actors scroll past in the opening credits, and I saw Olga Kurylenko was there, so I sort of, as a seasoned moviegoer, assumed that she was going to be the grown-up daughter that Natasha thought she blew up, and I was sort of right, because I also was like, well, she's probably going to turn out to be the actual bad guy. And then that wound up not being the case. It wound up not mattering. It wound up that Olga Kurylenko was maybe on set for 20 minutes total. It felt like a weird waste of a seasoned, well-known actress. But mostly the thing that stands out to me that didn't work was the pheromone part. Like, they needed a reason for her to not be able to hit him. But usually when I'm seeing superhero movies, I'm not going to sit back and be like, come on, that doesn't scientifically make sense. Whatever, like get on with the story. But with that, I was like, okay, I see what you're doing, but I could wish you were a little subtler about it.
Right. It feels like they kind of wanted to wave their hand and be like, it's some weird science thing he did that that she can't hit him. Although I did like the resolution of that. With the villains, I see what you mean, Kim, because he is the one thing he has, I say, going for him. The one thing that works is he's despicable. Like I said, he is a child kidnap trafficker and murderer. He is an awful person. Right. So on one hand, I think I do agree with you that they probably didn't want him to be too funny or likable a villain. because I think both these villains are very much, and I say villains realizing that ultimately Antonia Taskmaster is not, that, you know, they're sort of more symbolic for Natasha's life, about like the guy who turned her into this and the person that was collateral damage along the way. So I get that, but the fact that neither of them really have much dimension to them in this film did feel like, I wish we gotten something more there. Clearly, Antonia can come back again and probably will, but it also felt a little reminiscent to me of Ghost in Ant-Man and the Wasp, as far as like, she's really not that bad and now we can take her in at the end. You know, it felt, and she has a hood. So there was a little bit of a similarity there. Yeah, it felt like they needed a little more something there with one of those characters, since they were fairly filling a role.
That the character of Antonia was heartbreaking, actually. Having said that, Eric, and I'm not disputing that she was sidelined and perhaps not as villainous as she could have been, but like normally, so she kind of fills this mute girl trope that is very often criticized in movies for being, you know, a silenced woman. But I think it works really well here. Because there are other women in the film that are allowed to be strong and funny and fully rounded. And I think she's quite like, and she's a great actress. And I could read so much in her eyes when she's kind of revealed at the end, when everything is clear. You kind of see all this hurt behind her eyes that didn't need any words. And, you know, for me, she was representative of the pain and suffering that all those widows had gone through all around the world. And I found it heartbreaking.
You know, I think she is heartbreaking, but I guess, it's not even a criticism as much as an observation, because I kind of agree with you that it is by choice, because it's about Natasha in this movie, because again, she does survive. She clearly, like almost every character in this movie, can come back except Natasha and Dreykov. You know, I think we will get more with her, and I think she was a very important character for Natasha, but it did feel like with two villains, I guess one of them I thought needed a little more layering that we didn't get, even though I thought they both filled their roles as far as what they meant to Natasha's backstory in this. My other complaint is really about the end, which is, and I guess it's not too big a one, because I was talking with a friend of mine about the movie The Wolverine last night, which had a similar issue, but in a much bigger way, which is a really good, relatively smaller scale superhero movie that at the end, you kind of felt the studio saying, you have to go bigger. And that's why we got a cyborg samurai at the end of the Wolverine that didn't seem to fit anything. This doesn't have nearly as big a problem, but I did feel like the whole falling through the sky thing felt a little bit like an ending on an ending, because it feels like the dramatic apex is happening on that ship. And there was a way to kind of have that all happen there, but I almost felt like there was a little bit of the studio, but we got to have something huge happen at the end. And it felt a little like kind of extraneous, like, okay, they needed like some cool trailer shots. I didn't need it, but at least it's only maybe like an extra 5 minutes. What do you guys think of the kind of double conclusion there with on the ship and then the falling through the sky stuff?
I think you can't have a sky ship without knocking the ship out of the sky. I think that was an inevitability. We were just sort of all waiting for it to happen as soon as it was introduced. I was sort of like, yeah, well, now it's time for this to happen, obviously. I didn't even consider it part of the climax. I was like, yeah, the movie can't end until they crash the ship.
Well, they did say it was influenced by The Winter Soldier, the movie The Winter Soldier, which has 3 ships crashing at the end. So I guess they showed some leniency.
It did remind me of that as I was watching it. It reminded me of the Winter Soldier Captain America fight on the helicarrier, and the echoes between Antonia's character and Black Widow were there, weren't they, to tie them together. I think tying these stories together is sensible the right word? It's a sensible thing to do.
Right.
But I do agree with you, Eric, about that. And we had a conversation a couple of days ago, you and I, about the action. And for me, and I'm watching it on the IMAX screen, the action that I thought worked best was in the early stages of the movie in Morocco and Budapest.
Yeah. Agreed. I think it's one of those things where even though, yes, this is a smaller scale movie compared to Infinity War or Endgame, I don't know if they'll ever allow themselves to truly do a smaller scale movie. You know, I think they always kind of feel like we have to have some pizzazz there at the end. But again, it didn't take too much screen time, so more of a quibble. Let's talk about, just the timing of this movie, because that is a big thing. 10 years after, well, 11 years because of the delay, we finally get this movie about this character who is dead. You know, they have to tell a story that takes place before her death. So what do you think of us finally getting it at this time? And, did that hurt or help, or did not end up making a difference in how it landed, given the fact that we're getting it so late and after we kind of know this character's fate?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's affected it at all, having seen the movie now. Like, with the gap, we talked about this. I felt like the time for it had passed, but now I've seen it, definitely not. And it's still the first film of phase 4 of the MCU.
Yeah.
So, and while it's standalone, I think it does a lot to open up the future. We talked about it being a more brutal film than we've seen perhaps before. And I think, perhaps that's opening the door for characters like Wolverine and Deadpool and the other X-Men to come in and bring some of that darker tone, more violent tone with them. Mm-hmm. And of course, I know we'll go on to talk about the post-credit scene. It ties in nicely with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and the next stages in the MCU.
Billy, what'd you think? Would you have preferred if we actually got this movie right after Civil War, or even earlier? Not the story would be a little different, or did it still work for you, even sort of post Natasha death?
I think it worked better because it felt like a proper send-off for the character. I think arguably her canonical death was not necessarily the best send-off for her. Mm-hmm. I'm sure people will disagree with me. I didn't consider it to be a very fitting end for a character that had been with us for like a decade and who we barely got to know. So it was nice getting that interiority for her and then having a real proper goodbye and really feeling, especially in that post-credits scene, the chance to mourn her, which I don't think we really got when she died.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. It didn't end up bothering me as much. Like I fundamentally still think they should have done a Black Widow movie a few years ago. But once I saw the movie, it landed better than I worried it wouldn't, because of the timing of it. But I think it does work pretty well. And you kind of knew the post-credit scene, whatever it was going to have to deal with after her death, which it did. So yeah, while I still I'll deduct a little bit of points that it took them this long to make the movie, I still think they made it work in the long run. We talked about the villains, but let's talk a little bit about and we're going to go take some questions from chat in a little bit. But what did you guys think of the main supporting cast? First and foremost, of course, Florence Pugh is Yelena, who, another Black Widow from the comics. It was easy to assume with that casting and the timing of this movie that she will kind of take on the mantle going forward. What did you think of her introduction here?
Go for it, Bailey.
Oh, Billy.
Sure. Okay. I thought she was great. I mean, like, really hot take here, I know, but Florence Pugh's a really good actress.
What?
She's super charming. She's really compelling. She just embodies the character so well, and you just immediately like her. And so for her to be the continuation of where this, like, of where the Black Widow character goes is, I find that very compelling. I would love to see more of her. I think her character is great. She's funny. And I think 100% very pro Pugh over here.
Are you pro Pugh as well, Kim?
I am very pro Pugh. That's hard to say. For me, I don't see characters like this very often on screen in mainstream cinema, women characters like this. She, often you'll get a woman character that's allowed to be strong, and she can do all the things that that men can, only better, and will be the one rolling their eyes at the stupid antics of the men. But in this case, Florence Pugh as Yelena Belova gets to be that traditional male character that's allowed to be funny as well as very capable, you know, which I loved, and she was great.
Yeah, I echo everyone else. She's great. You know, I already loved her from other things, but she's great in this. She's really great just with reactions. You know, while it kind of boils to a head later in the film, her feelings about like, hey, this was real for me. I just love even like the first time Natasha has kind of a throwaway line about, well, we weren't really sisters when that convenience store, and that kind of just her reaction shot, it kind of says so much. But I also really like that she gets to be funny in a weird way, because, you know, a criticism of some of these movies is that with so many characters who are funny, sometimes they can sound too much alike. And it's like, if Doctor Strange is making a quip, is it that different from a Tony Stark quip? But they made her weird funny, and I really liked that. Like, I like that she's quirky, so she feels different. She doesn't feel like she's just doing like a Tony Stark variation. I laughed a lot. When I saw it again last night, a line that I hadn't even clocked the first time made me laugh a lot, which is in the middle of the big helicopter prison escape, and she says to Natasha, "We're both doing a really great job." It's just like this, like sort of weird non sequitur that I thought was very funny. So yeah, it was a great performance, but also just a really different kind of thing. When I interviewed the director, Kate Shortland, and she actually said that Eric Pearson, who wrote this movie, and he wrote Thor Ragnarok and rewrote a lot of Marvel movies, that she felt Eric Pearson is Yelena, that quirkiness is like him, and he put a lot of it into her, but it definitely worked. Let's talk about the other members of the family we meet here and the backstory, which is obviously David Harbour as Alexei and Rachel Weisz as Melina. What did you think of the two of them?
Yeah, I like both of them. I've seen some people saying that they felt that David Harbour was hammy, which I guess he was, but it worked. He was funny and great support. And the one criticism I would have is that Rachel Weisz wasn't in it as much as I'd have liked. She was also great. So that foursome just worked really, really well together.
What about you, Bailey?
Oh, I agree. No, I agree. David Harbour, I can see criticisms where people would say he was hammy, but I think the hamminess was intentional and worked really, really well. Plus that intro to him is like, it is so brutal, kind of like, it's funny and it's a very good intro to his character, but he also visibly breaks someone's wrist on camera. And so you're like, okay, like this guy is big and like boisterous, but he's also not someone to mess with. And it was a great first impression, and I'm still left thinking about the character more than I thought I was going to. And with Rachel Weisz, exactly my criticism of anything Rachel Weisz is in is that she should be in it more. Even if she's like front and center the whole time, I'm like, well, but there could have been 20 more minutes, I think, of this, honestly. She's so good. And she does a lot with what is comparatively little compared to the rest of what the family gets. But even just like that one little line at the end where she's like, I am clearly injured. It's like, she delivers it so well. And she's so like funny, and you can really like believe her motivation when she turns around and betrays her organization. You buy that she has done this. It makes sense because she is such a compelling actress who really does such a good job selling that connection she had to those two little girls.
Yeah, I do think David Harbour, the hamminess is very calculated hamminess, because the character is so filled with false bravado and is kind of putting up a front. And I think when he needs to be vulnerable, he does that well. I'm with you. There's never enough Rachel Weisz. The more, the better. But I will say, I think the character needed one or two more scenes, only because she has to kind of sell an entire arc in one scene, which is, I'm kind of all about the science. Isn't it kind of impressive? We can control these people. And then, oh my God, this actually affected someone I love, and I need to like make a huge choice. And she's a great actress, so she does sell it, but it felt like that should have used a couple more scenes to have her go through all of that. You know, ideally, I wish there was a way to kind of bring her into the story a little earlier.
Maybe we do that, and then we leave the ship in the sky.
Right, exactly. And the ship, not as much ship falling.
one of the things I loved was that Rachel Weisz is obviously married to a James Bond, and this had lots of Bond parallels. And Olga Kurilenko was in a Bond movie as a Bond girl. So
with David Harbour, he was in the same movie. It all comes together. Not lastly, for all of it, we're going to go to your questions or some of your comments in a minute. But one big thing I want to talk about before we do that is the post-credit scene, of course. The only one, by the way, I have to say, for me, it stood out so much. I had just rewatched all the MCU movies a couple months ago, that this movie had opening credits at all, much less that I thought they were very sort of dark and striking, just because they don't do opening credits unless you're James Gunn these days. They hadn't done them since Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2, minus the Guardians movie. So the fact that there were opening credits at all was interesting. That meant there was no mid-credit scene because they didn't do the cool big credits at the end. But what did you think of this post-credit scene, which it was interesting because it was almost two scenes in one, because there's a very emotional, sad part, and then there's here's the setup for the future part. Bailey, what'd you think of the post-credit scene?
I think they did a lot with a little. I think that about face, again, works really well because you have a very strong actress in Florence Pugh playing off with another very strong actress in Julia Louis-Dreyfus, which more of her, I'm so excited to learn what her whole deal is, because she seems great. Anytime she shows up, I'm like, oh, I love what's going on here. Keep going. I am excited to see Florence Pugh murder real life actor Jeremy Renner. I think that's going to be interesting for Marvel to film, but I'm down to see it in IMAX if they're down to release it there.
I have a feeling it might go a little different. But Kim, what'd you think of the post-credit scene?
Well, firstly, because you mentioned the opening credits, I just wanted to say that I felt like it was Marvel's Up, the most touching kind of emotional start to a Marvel movie ever.
Yeah, it's like, isn't this wrenching? All right, let's have some fun.
But I'd also say, like, there's a likeness to the post-credits scene when the Contessa turns up. But also, I was very much, my reaction was like, oh no, because she's manipulating her. So Yelena's being manipulated again. And I just thought, oh God, she's going to go after Hawkeye now, who is her sister's friend, and I don't want this, and it's upsetting me.
Yeah, I thought it worked really well. It's weird because part of me is like, I wonder if there's a way to literally split these in two, only because you have to make a quick tonal shift, because there's the version of that. They make it seem like it's the scene's over when they cut to the wide shot after she whistles and she's holding this stone. And you could have just gone out like that and be like, that was really sad. But then, of course, there's more. And I'm like, it's almost like I said, two scenes in one for that reason. But again, very good actors can sell this quick tonal shift that they do. And I think both those aspects work really well. And I think, we'd heard when Contessa was introduced on Falcon Winter Soldier, the plan was to introduce her in this movie first, but either way it works. Like, it's like she's pulling the strings. She's got an agenda. I see that one of the questions or comments is about that. We'll get to that in a moment. So I'm still very intrigued by that. And it's a great like out. And it's the great, again, on a movie that's very self-contained and telling a story about a character that died. And I think does that successfully. You want to leave them wanting more. So, when she inevitably shows up in Hawkeye out for revenge, they did their job of teasing me. And I'll see if will it be about her versus Renner, or will her and Haley Steinfeld be having a brawl? I think that might be the latter. That might be where we're going with this.
Who will win? Who will win?
Who will win? Superheroes have to fight first before they realize we're on the same team, guys. Pausing for a second, just to say thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't, please subscribe to our channel for videos every weekday. Hit that like, hit that bell for us. We'll be back next week with plenty more, including on Wednesday, talking about the final episode of Loki, or Loki season 1 at least, since there's so many rumors that season 2 is happening. So be back for more Marvel spoiler chat there. Let's go and look at some of the AMA here. What's coming in from the chat? Let's see. Stereo Man UK says they needed someone who looked Russian rather than Ray Winstone. Sorry, Ray. I don't know about looked Russian. I'm both sides of my family are from Russia, going back generations. So can I have played Dreykov? I don't know.
He's so Cockney. Is he even a Cockney? Have I made that up? He's definitely a Londoner.
I can't remember if it was you, Kim. It might have been you and other people said that it was a funny thing where it was like he was half Russian gangster, half Cockney gangster.
Straight out of a Guy Ritchie movie.
John Bainbridge asks, so what happened in Budapest? Do they even show that in the movie? You know, Budapest is something that was like a throwaway line in the first Avengers movie about like where, you know, this is just like Budapest. You remember it way differently than me. They decided to kind of make it a runner in Endgame when they're flying into space, and they're like, we're a long way from Budapest or Budapest. So what did you guys take from this? And was it enough? Did they explain enough about what happened in Budapest in this film?
I thought we got a really good explainer of what happened in Budapest. We even saw the tic-tac-toe games that Black Widow presumably crushed Hawkeye in. It was exactly the right amount of detail for me, a person who heard them say Budapest a couple times and went, yeah, that's probably something. And then they were like, it sure was. It answered my question there.
I agree. And what it did for me was underline the fact that Natasha and Clint have never slept together.
Which I think is the right choice. Yeah, I'm totally fine with how they did it. Again, there is the version with a much more elaborate flashback that Jeremy Renner is in, but I think they very purposely didn't want this movie to become about that. And so it's like, you know, Budapest is where he helped convince her to change. We get little glimpses. The arrows that he shot in the apartment, it can be like they fought, and then they had some sort of conversation, and then he convinced her to switch sides, and then she went to kill Dreykov, and they had to escape together. So we get pieces. I'm okay not getting every single thing. I think we got enough about why it's important here. Maybe it's a little, you know, it's that tonal thing of like, would she be ever joking about Budapest, given how heavy this is, and she thought she killed a kid? Maybe not, but we all have
time heals all wounds.
Right. Or, you know, we use humor as a mask, you know, it's okay. Let's see. Okay, couple people here bring up the Taskmaster of it all. And I know this gets into more comics minutia and how much did you love Taskmaster from the comics, if you knew him at all, with, you know, Zayas Bilou saying he couldn't get into the movie, and what they did with Taskmaster is so underwhelming. He and the Mandarin are two of my favorite comic book villains. And Langley M. Neely saying, I like the emotion behind the Taskmaster reveal. I just didn't think it needed to be Taskmaster. I hope we get a traditional Taskmaster down the line. Again, you know, the comics sum up here is Taskmaster. The comics is just his own guy. It is a guy who is a badass assassin and spy who can mimic everyone, and has no, you know, none of the backstory, none of the reveal is there. I don't know. I will say, as the you know, as someone who's read comics my entire life and knows Taskmaster, it didn't bother me that much. I'm okay with these changes. I do think Antonia, I want to see more of her in the future to kind of give her more dimension. But did you guys like want more from Taskmaster? Did you think like they used enough of even the mimic abilities? What do you think of like before the reveal, what they did with Taskmaster?
Yeah, I think they could probably have made more of the mimic abilities. That wasn't that clear to me. You know, even on a second watch, actually, it could have been there could have been a lot more fanfare around it, I guess. But I loved what they did with the character. As I said, you know, for me, she was emblematic of all of those widows, and without going down that road and telling that story, which is another film, I think, you know, a Red Sparrow or, you know, whatever. There's tons of movies about human trafficking. I thought that they handled it really well, and that's what I wanted from Taskmaster, and I didn't even know I wanted it.
Billy, what did you think about, you know, besides the reveal, sort of the use of Taskmaster throughout the film?
Yeah, I agree. It was a little thin. I think, you know, they did make a big deal about the mimic ability. And then you really only saw it in that instance when Natasha is initially fighting Taskmaster, and not even in like a fighting way, in a sort of, they were doing a fun little improv game and then they kicked each other's butts way. Like it never really played in the way Taskmaster fought. And she seemed like such a like dangerous and terrifying adversary for them to have, and then wound up not even really fighting them all that much. So it was like one fight scene at the beginning, and then she was just sort of sidelined, and I would have loved to see more of her.
Yeah, I didn't mind the gender swap. I didn't mind the backstory swap. But yeah, I did think it was too subtle. Like when I've rewatched the movie, I've like, okay, obviously, like there's the Black Panther claws, and there's that one Bucky move with dropping the knife and catching it, and of course throwing the shield. I did like that she can't make it bounce. She can throw it, but they were like, well, only a Captain America can make that shield bounce back to them. So it was there, but I felt like because it is a very cool, because I think the reason people love Taskmaster is a fun costume in the comics, which is even more fun with the long cape and the full skull mask and the abilities. Because I don't think he's like the greatest character in the comics. He's just cool. And it's like why people like Darth Maul initially. Looks cool. But yeah, I felt they could have done a little more there with that mimic thing. And hopefully going forward, that's something where they can maybe more directly have like, I loved when she was introduced watching the Hawkeye Black Panther fight from Civil War, but then not quite enough there. Let's see, we have one or two more here. I'll do. Well, Marianne says just a statement. Yelena got the best lines, both funny and emotional. Guys, I have a feeling we concur, but do we all concur on that?
I'm not going to disagree with that.
Yeah, no, fully agree. I think it makes sense too if you're going to hinge the future of a series on a new character. You probably want her to have the real big, good, fun moments that are laugh out loud and cry out loud.
Yep. And I think because Florence Pugh is so good, it's great because she can make lines that could be funny or could not be funny for sure. And even just sometimes it's like, is her yelling ha after she blows up that tower funny in and of itself? Well, it definitely is when she delivers it. So kudos to Pugh as always. I think I'll end on Jenna James's thing here, which is I like this movie, definitely rated a B. Fights were good, and I'm excited to see a Dark Avengers versus Young Avengers movie down the line. This kind of ties into something I wanted to bring up about the post-credit scene, because we've been talking a lot about they clearly are setting up Young Avengers. They're introducing all these young heroes throughout all these different stories, and we're going to get Haley Steinfeld as the young Hawkeye, and we even in Falcon Winter Soldier having Eli, the grandson of the former the Captain America that from the 50s, be in there. They're setting all these characters up, but now we've got the Contessa, and I'm like, okay, she has John Walker working for her, so she's got a Captain America, and now she's got Yelena working for her, so she's got a Black Widow. So they're totally doing, whether they call it Thunderbolts or Dark Avengers, right? Like she's Nick Furying through the MCU right now.
I would think so. I'm wondering if she's going to recruit Red Guardian as well. I'd like to see him again.
There you go. What do you like, Bailey? The idea of Julia Louis-Dreyfus with her own team of Avengers for whatever purposes?
Absolutely, an Avengers that's funny and has bad morals and is just wreaking havoc everywhere. Sign me up.
I too endorse this. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, that's like kind of the fun they can have with these things, where they're setting these things up. They're not going to explicitly say it just yet until 2 Comic-Cons from now or whenever, when he puts up the graphic of what a Dark Avengers or Thunderbolts or whatever have you. But I'm there for it, and it's fun to have Julia Louis-Dreyfus with a little dye in her hair in this universe. All right, guys, thank you for joining us on our Black Widow spoiler journey. Hope you enjoyed the movie. If you didn't, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. We will be back next week. Happy weekend and farewell. Bye, guys.